Hi everyone. So today we are trying to build an application. Uh, the application will be built with Vue.js in the front end, and it will use Spring Boot in the back end, and we'll use something called social login using Firebase. I have created video to demonstrate how we are using it, so please watch it before you continue this video, because in this video I will go deep dive on the code base, how we have integrated the backend, front end and Firebase to create the application. So just to give a demonstration, we have this application and you can log in using Github, and you can see the list of users that have logged in using Github, and you can see the users in the database which is running in a Spring Boot application, and we are using Firebase. You can see all the email and the providers who have logged in using GitHub or the email in our application. I'm also writing an tutorial in Medium how to use social login using Spring Boot, Vue.js and Firebase. It is still in progress, and I have found a really great tutorial thanks to Medium. So one is this tutorial, Vue 2 plus Firebase. So I have just copied the code here basically, and it's a great code, and they have really explained it in detail how to integrate the social login using Firebase. So I suggest you to go through this code and like the tutorial and implement this. And I have found another tutorial using Spring Boot API for the backend, and I've also copied this code base. It's also a great tutorial. So, and I have integrated both this front end and this back end together. So the thing is, we will log in using GitHub, and we can see all the users here, and we will store the users in the back end. So let's see the API first. So we have two things like public endpoint and private endpoint, and these are all modified from the code base of Spring Boot of the Medium tutorial that I have showed you guys. So these are the public endpoint, and you don't need to authenticate to use those endpoints. And these are the private endpoint, and you need to authenticate to use these endpoints. And when you pass the ID token, you will get it. So the question is, what is ID token? Okay, let me explain it in this way. So when you log in, and this is the front end code basically, and close all. So if you see in the login, I have used this code, social GitHub login. So when you click the GitHub login, the code comes here, and we have this method Firebase auth sign in provider, and when you get the result after a successful login, then I have this method Firebase auth current user get ID token, and I get the ID token from the Firebase. Now I pass this ID token in the backend this private endpoint, and when I pass this ID token in the backend, I pass this ID token to the Firebase, and then Firebase gives me the user DTO. It consists of these fields: ID, name, email, these things, and I save these details in my user service, which you can see here. We have this user repository and user model. It consists of ID, name, email, role, and picture. So when we hit the Firebase from the Spring by the ID token, the Firebase gives us this information, and I save this information in my database. And once we have this information in our database, then we can proceed and we can make more, we can build our application on top of it. The best thing is that our server is stateless. We don't have to worry about session, cookies, anything. We just get that ID token from the front end. I pass the ID token to the GitHub, and it to the Firebase authentication, and it tells me the user is authenticated, and then I can work on my application. I don't have to worry about authorization or authentication. So GitHub, like the Firebase, does it for me, and I can build my applications on top of this, which is great, because if you want to implement this by the Spring security, it gets very complicated. I tried to implement that, but it's like really complicated. But Firebase makes it very easy for you, and you can use all kinds of social login. Like you can see that in Firebase we have GitHub, you have all sign-in methods, like you have GitHub, Facebook, Twitter, and which is really easy to implement. And like in the future I will add more ways of logging, like I will use GitHub, then I will use Facebook and Google, and then I can build my application on top of that, which is great. So to dive deep into the code, let me just so we have mainly two API right now. One is get user. So in the private IP address, to get the user details, and we have one API save user, and in the public endpoint I have one API called users. It will get all the users from this user service. Like user is pretty easy code. I just get all the users from the repo that I have saved in the table, and I'm displaying it. So by using that, I can create more private endpoint and public endpoint which I need, and it's a great way to build your application. I won't go deep into the code because you can see the code easily in the GitHub, and also if you follow this tutorial, you'll understand how it is done. I don't want to repeat the same thing. These two tutorials are great. I will provide these two tutorial link in the video description. You can check it out, and you can check out my code, and if you want, you can use this one to build a robust authentication system which will be stateless in the backend, and you can use client of your choice, like you can use Vue.js, you can use Angular, or you can use React, anything, and let Firebase take care of all the authentication and the hard things that is difficult to implement. And even if you implement it, you can never be sure that if it is secure enough, and you can build on the cool application. Like you can build e-commerce, you can build social network, anything that you want. Like I am planning to build a social network on top of it, like where users can send friend requests to each other, and they will be able to have a video call or chat, or we'll create this. But this can be a foundation to create your application on top of this Firebase authentication, which is, I think, is really great. So thank you guys for watching, and stay tuned for the next tutorials and videos where we will try to create a proper authentication, a proper social media, like social networking site on top of it. It is going to be quite exciting. Thank you guys for watching.